My name is Vincent Carver, and I've been transporting bodies for the County Medical Examiner's Office in Clallam County, Washington, for the past 9 years. I know what you're thinking. It's a grim job, driving corpses from accident scenes, hospitals, and homes to the morgue in the middle of the night. You're right, it is grim. But it's also steady work. It pays better than you'd think, and after a while, you become numb to it. Death stops being this profound, terrifying thing and becomes just another part of the paperwork. A weight to be recorded, a temperature to be noted, a body to be bagged, tagged, and logged. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand that I'm not some rookie who spooked himself on his first pickup. I've handled decomposed remains pulled from the woods after 3 weeks. I've transported victims of violent crimes, suicides, and industrial accidents that would turn your stomach. I've dealt with the smell, the fluids, the weight of dead children. I've done this job long enough that nothing should have rattled me the way it did on Christmas night, 2019. It was just after 11 p.m. when the call came through. I was parked in the lot behind the county morgue, finishing a thermos of coffee and listening to old blues on the radio. Snow had been falling steadily since mid-afternoon, and the roads were slick but manageable. Most of the county was home by then, wrapping presents or watching movies with their families. I was alone, as usual, waiting for the phone to buzz. When it did, I almost didn't answer. It was Christmas, after all. But this job doesn't stop for holidays. If anything, holidays are busier. Drunk drivers, heart attacks, family arguments that go too far. Death doesn't take a day off, and neither do I. The dispatcher's voice crackled through. "Vincent, we've got a pickup for you. Single deceased male, age 73, natural causes, looks like a cardiac event. Address is 4228 Laurel Canyon Road, about 30 miles west of Port Angeles. Family's requesting transport tonight. Can you handle it?" I checked the time. It would take me 40 minutes to get there, maybe another 30 to load and return. I'd be back by 1 a.m. if the weather held. "Yeah, I've got it," I said. "Text me the details." The address came through a moment later, along with the deceased's name. Harold Eugene Moss. No next of kin present at the scene. Family had found him earlier in the evening and called it in, but they'd already left by the time the coroner arrived. The body had been examined and cleared for transport. Straightforward. I pulled out of the lot and headed west on Route 101. The highway was nearly empty, just the occasional set of headlights passing in the opposite direction. Snow swirled in the beams of my van, and the windshield wipers thumped a steady rhythm. I'd made this drive 100 times, sometimes twice in one night. The van was a white Ford Transit, no markings except for a small county decal on the door. People don't like to know when they're driving next to a corpse. The radio played softly as I drove, some late-night DJ spinning classic rock between weather updates. The forecast called for 6 to 8 inches overnight, but the roads were still passable. I'd driven in worse. The heater hummed, keeping the cab warm, and the coffee kept me alert. This was just another night, just another body, just another routine transport that would be forgotten by morning. Laurel Canyon Road was a narrow 2-lane that wound through dense forest. The turnoff was easy to miss if you weren't paying attention, especially in the snow. I slowed as I approached, my headlights catching the faded green sign. The road climbed steadily into the foothills, and the trees pressed in close on either side. It was the kind of road where you didn't see another car for miles, where the forest seemed to swallow sound and light, leaving you in a pocket of isolation. The Moss property was at the end of a gravel driveway, a small cabin set back from the road. The porch light was on, casting a weak yellow glow across the snow-covered yard. I parked near the front steps and killed the engine. The silence was immediate and total. No wind, No distant traffic. Just the soft hiss of snow falling and the occasional creak of branches overhead, weighted down with fresh powder. I climbed out, grabbed my gurney and body bag from the back, and approached the cabin. The front door was unlocked, as I'd been told it would be. I knocked anyway, a courtesy, then pushed it open. The hinges creaked, breaking the stillness. The interior was warm and smelled faintly of wood smoke and something medicinal. Menthol, maybe, or eucalyptus. The main room was small and cluttered, with a couch, a television, and a wood-burning stove in the corner. A narrow hallway led to the back of the cabin. Family photos lined the walls. Harold in his younger days, a woman who must have been his wife, children at various ages. The frames were dusty, like they hadn't been touched in years. "Mr. Moss?" I called out, though I knew there'd be no answer. It's something I always do, just in case. You'd be surprised how many times family members are still lingering, too upset to leave, even after the coroner's gone. No response. I wheeled the gurney down the hallway, the wheels squeaking faintly on the hardwood floor. The bedroom was at the end, door ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside. Harold Moss was lying on his back in the center of a narrow bed, fully clothed in flannel pajamas and a wool cardigan. His hands were folded neatly over his chest, as if someone had arranged him that way. His eyes were closed, his face slack and pale. The room was cold, much colder than the rest of the cabin, and I could see my breath misting in the air. A bedside table held a lamp, a water glass, and a small leather-bound book. I glanced at it briefly. A Bible, well worn, with pages marked by scraps of paper. The window curtains were drawn, but I could hear the wind beginning to pick up outside, rattling the glass in its frame. I approached the bed and checked for a pulse, just to be sure. Nothing. His skin was cool to the touch, but not yet stiff. Rigor mortis hadn't fully set in, which meant he'd been dead for less than 6 hours. The coroner's report said he'd been found around 7 p.m., so that tracked. His mouth was slightly open, and his skin had that waxy, artificial quality that bodies get soon after death. I'd seen it 1,000 times. I unfolded the body bag and laid it out on the floor beside the gurney, then carefully rolled Mr. Moss onto his side to slide the bag beneath him. He was heavier than he looked. Dead weight always is. But I've done this enough times that it's almost mechanical. Slide, roll, zip. The sound of the zipper was loud in the quiet room, each tooth clicking into place with metallic finality. I transferred him onto the gurney, secured the straps, chest, waist, and ankles, and double-checked each one. Tight, secure, standard protocol. I wheeled him back through the cabin, pausing at the front door to make sure I hadn't left anything behind. The wood stove was still burning low, but the family would come back tomorrow to deal with the property. That wasn't my concern. The snow was coming down heavier now, and the driveway was slick beneath the gurney's wheels. I loaded him into the back of the van, locked the doors, and climbed into the driver's seat. The clock on the dashboard read 11:47 p.m. I'd be back at the morgue by 12:30, maybe 12:45 with the weather. I could finish the paperwork and be home by 1:30. Not a bad night. I started the engine and pulled back onto Laurel Canyon Road. The headlights cut through the falling snow, illuminating the narrow path ahead. The trees seemed closer now, their branches forming a tunnel overhead. The drive back to the morgue should have been uneventful. It always was. But about 10 minutes in, I heard it. A sound from the back of the van. It was faint at first, a rustling, like fabric shifting. I glanced in the rearview mirror, but all I could see was darkness. The cargo area wasn't lit, and the rear windows were tinted. I told myself it was nothing. Bodies shift sometimes during transport, especially if the straps aren't tight enough, or if you hit a bump in the road. Gases build up in the digestive tract. Muscles contract as the body temperature drops. It's normal. It's natural. I'd heard it dozens of times before, but then I heard it again. Louder this time. A definite movement, like something rolling over. I slowed the van and pulled onto the shoulder, my heart beating a little faster than I wanted to admit. I put it in park, left the engine running, and climbed out. The snow was ankle deep now, and the wind had picked up, howling through the trees. I walked around to the back of the van and opened the doors. The body bag was exactly where I'd left it, strapped securely to the gurney. I unzipped it partway and checked. Harold Moss was still dead, still pale, still cold. His eyes were still closed, his hands still folded over his chest. His jaw had gone slack, which sometimes happens during transport, but otherwise, nothing had changed. I zipped the bag back up, tugged on each strap to make sure they were tight, and closed the doors. I stood there for a moment in the snow, feeling foolish. 9 years on this job, and I was jumping at shadows. I climbed back into the driver's seat, cranked up the heat, and pulled back onto the road. The highway was empty, the snow falling so thick now that I could barely see 20 feet ahead. My wipers were on full speed, and the defroster was blasting, but the windshield kept fogging up. I wiped it with my sleeve and kept driving. The road curved and climbed, following the contours of the hillside. That's when I heard it again. This time, it wasn't a rustle. It was a thump. A single, heavy thump, like something or someone had struck the wall of the van from the inside. I hit the brakes, and the van skidded slightly on the icy road before coming to a stop. My hands were shaking now. I turned in my seat and stared at the dark cargo area. "Hello," I called out, my voice unsteady. Nothing. I reached for the interior light switch and flicked it on. The back of the van was suddenly illuminated, harsh fluorescent light flooding the space. I could see the gurney clearly. The body bag was still zipped, still secure, but the straps were loose. I know I'd tightened those straps, I always do. It's part of the protocol, drilled into me during training. Chest, waist, ankles. Check, check, check. But now, they hung slack on either side of the gurney, as if they'd been unbuckled from the inside. I stared at them for a long moment, my mind racing. This wasn't possible. Bodies don't unbuckle straps. They don't move. They don't... Another thump, louder this time, and then unmistakably, the sound of the zipper being pulled down. Slowly, deliberately, each tooth separating with a soft, metallic hiss. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I threw the van into drive and floored it, the tires spinning on the ice before finally catching traction. The van lurched forward, and I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. The speedometer climbed rapidly. 40, 50, 60 miles per hour on a snow-covered highway. Behind me, I heard the zipper slide all the way down. I heard fabric rustling. I heard the unmistakable creak of the gurney shifting under weight, the metal frame groaning as something sat up. And then I heard breathing. Not the shallow, irregular breathing of someone unconscious. Not the labored gasps of someone struggling. This was steady, calm, deliberate. The breathing of someone who was wide awake. Someone who had been waiting. I didn't look back. I couldn't. My eyes were locked on the road ahead, my foot pressed flat against the accelerator. The speedometer climbed, 50, 60, 70 miles per hour on a snow-covered highway. I didn't care. I just needed to get back to the morgue. I needed to get out of this van. I needed to be around other people, around light and noise and normalcy. "Where are we going, Vincent?" The voice came from directly behind me. It was low and hoarse, like gravel scraping against metal. It didn't sound like the voice of a 73-year-old man. It didn't sound human. There was something wrong with the cadence, the way the syllables stretched and contracted, like whoever was speaking was remembering how to form words. I still didn't turn around. I couldn't. My entire body was locked in place, every muscle tensed, every nerve screaming at me to keep driving. My hands were welded to the steering wheel, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. The snow swirled hypnotically in the headlights. "I asked you a question, Vincent." The voice was closer now. I could feel the presence behind me, inches from the back of my seat. I could smell it, something sour and chemical, like formaldehyde mixed with rot, with an underlying sweetness that made my stomach turn. It was the smell of the morgue, the smell of death, but magnified 100 times. I don't know what you are," I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. "But you're dead. Harold Moss is dead. I checked. No pulse, no breathing. You're dead." A long silence, then a sound that might have been a laugh. It was a wet, bubbling sound, like air escaping from a drowning man's lungs. "Harold Moss is dead," the voice agreed. "But I'm not Harold Moss." My blood turned to ice. The heater was blasting, but I couldn't feel the warmth. My entire body was cold, numb, as if the temperature had dropped 30 degrees in an instant. "Then what are you?" Another pause. I could hear the thing shifting in the space behind me, could hear the leather of the body bag creaking, could hear fabric dragging across metal. Whatever it was moving, getting closer. "I've been waiting a long time for a ride, Vincent. A long, long time. Do you know how long I've been sleeping? How many years I've been locked in the dark, waiting for someone to open the door, waiting for someone like you? I don't understand." "You don't need to understand. You just need to drive. Keep driving, Vincent. Don't stop. Don't look back. Just drive." Where? Where am I supposed to go?" "You'll know when we get there." I risked a glance in the rearview mirror. What I saw made me swerve off the road. It wasn't Harold Moss. The face staring back at me was wrong. The features were his, the same sagging jowls, the same thin gray hair, the same liver spots on the pale skin. But the eyes were black, completely black, like two holes punched into reality. No whites, no iris, just endless empty black that seemed to absorb the light around them. And the mouth was open far wider than it should have, been stretched into a grin that showed too many teeth. Rows and rows of teeth, like a shark's mouth, receding back into the darkness of the throat. The van skidded off the shoulder and plowed into a snowbank, the impact throwing me forward against the seatbelt. My head struck the steering wheel, and stars exploded across my vision. The engine stalled, and the headlights flickered once, twice, then went dark. The world outside disappeared into blackness. For a moment, everything was silent. Just the sound of my own ragged breathing and the wind howling outside. Then I heard the door behind me creak open. Cold air rushed into the van, so cold it burned my lungs. I fumbled for my seatbelt, my hands shaking so badly I could barely work the release. The buckle wouldn't give. It was stuck, or I was too panicked to work it properly. I could hear something moving in the back of the van, could hear feet, or something like feet, touching the floor. I finally got the seatbelt loose and threw open the driver's door, stumbling out into the snow. The cold hit me like a slap, and my boots immediately sank into the drift. I didn't care. I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't think. I just ran, my boots slipping on the ice, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The forest was dark and endless around me, and the snow stung my face, but I kept going. Branches whipped at my face and tore at my jacket. My lungs burned with the cold air. But I couldn't stop. Behind me, I heard footsteps. They were slow, deliberate, unhurried. The crunch of boots in snow, except the rhythm was wrong. Too many steps, too close together. Like something with more than two legs was following me. You can't run from me, Vincent." The voice was everywhere now, echoing through the trees, reverberating in my skull. It seemed to come from all directions at once, from the branches above and the ground below and the air itself. I've been in the dark for so long, so very long, and now I'm free. Free to walk, free to breathe, free to see the world through new eyes. I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. My legs burned, my chest ached, but pure terror drove me forward. I crashed through underbrush, stumbled over hidden roots, fell and scrambled back to my feet. The forest was a maze of shadows and snow, and I had no idea where I was going. Do you know what it's like, Vincent? To be trapped, to be locked in the darkness of a dead man's skull, listening to his heart stop, feeling his blood grow cold. Do you know what it's like to ride in a corpse while it's loaded into a bag and zipped up tight? I tripped over something, a log, a rock, I couldn't tell, and went down hard, my hands plunging into the snow. I scrambled to my feet, my breath coming in panicked sobs. Harold Moss was a good man, a God-fearing man. He read his Bible every night, said his prayers. But when he died, when his soul left his body, there was a moment, just a moment, when the door was open, and I slipped inside. I looked back. That was my mistake. The thing wearing Harold Moss's body was standing 20 feet behind me, illuminated by nothing but the ambient glow of snow-covered trees. It wasn't walking. It was hovering, its feet inches above the ground, the body bag hanging from its shoulders like a cloak. Its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and those black eyes were fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. You should feel honored, Vincent. You're the first person I've spoken to in a very long time. The first living person, anyway. The dead don't make for good conversation. I turned and ran again, blind panic overriding every rational thought. I don't know how long I ran. It felt like hours. It felt like seconds. My sense of time had completely shattered. The forest stretched on endlessly, every tree looking the same, every direction identical. Eventually, I saw lights ahead, a gas station closed for the night. But the sign was still lit, a beacon of civilization in the wilderness. I stumbled into the parking lot and collapsed against the wall, my chest heaving, my vision blurring. My hands were numb, my face burned from the cold, and my lungs felt like they were full of broken glass. I waited there, pressing myself against the cold brick wall, listening for any sound of pursuit. But there was nothing. Just the wind and the falling snow and the hum of the gas station sign overhead. I stayed there until morning, shivering in the cold, too terrified to move. Every shadow made me flinch. Every gust of wind made me hold my breath. But nothing came. As the sky began to lighten, turning from black to deep blue to pale gray, I finally allowed myself to believe I might survive. When the sun finally rose, weak and pale behind the clouds, I walked back to the van. It took me an hour to find it, retracing my panicked flight through the forest. The van was still stuck in the snowbank, the driver's door hanging open. Snow had blown inside, covering the seat and dashboard. The back doors were open too, swinging gently in the wind. I approached slowly, every instinct screaming at me to turn around, to leave, to never look inside. But I had to know. The body bag was empty. Harold Moss was gone. The gurney was still there, the straps hanging loose, but the bag itself was empty. Not torn, not damaged, just empty, as if whatever had been inside had simply climbed out and walked away. I stood there for a long time, staring at that empty bag, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. There had to be an explanation. There had to be. Bodies don't just disappear. Bodies don't get up and walk away. This wasn't possible. But I knew what I'd seen. I knew what I'd heard. I reported the van as having mechanical trouble and hitched a ride back to Port Angeles, with a passing trucker who stopped at the gas station around 8 a.m. I told him I'd slid off the road and spent the night in the van, that my phone had died and I couldn't call for help. He didn't ask questions, just gave me coffee from his thermos and dropped me off at the county building. I never told anyone what really happened. What could I say? That a corpse came to life and spoke to me. That something wearing Harold Moss's face crawled out of a body bag and chased me through the woods. That I'd lost a body in the forest on Christmas night. They'd think I'd lost my mind, or worse, they'd think I'd done something to the body. They'd investigate. They'd ask questions I couldn't answer. So I lied. I said I'd stopped to check the straps, and when I went back to close the doors, something must have triggered them to open again during the drive. The body must have rolled out when I hit the snowbank. By the time I'd gotten out to check, it was gone, probably dragged away by animals. It was a thin story, but it was all I had. They searched the area for 3 days, brought in dogs, checked every inch of the forest around where the van had crashed. They never found Harold Moss. They never found any sign of him at all. No tracks, no blood, no torn clothing, nothing. The official report listed it as an incident of lost remains due to driver error and adverse weather conditions. I was reprimanded, but not fired. They chalked it up to the conditions, to exhaustion, to bad luck. After all, I'd had a perfect record for 9 years. One mistake was forgivable. I quit 2 weeks later. I couldn't do it anymore. Every time I zipped up a body bag, every time I loaded a gurney into the back of that van, I'd hear that voice in my head. I've been waiting a long time for a ride, Vincent. I took a job at a warehouse moving boxes during the day shift. The work was mindless, the pay was worse, but I didn't have to be alone. I didn't have to drive through the darkness with the dead. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm lying in bed and the house is quiet, I swear I can hear it breathing. That same steady, deliberate breathing. And I know, deep down, that whatever was in Harold Moss's body that night is still out there, still walking, still breathing, still looking for someone else to give it a ride. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was a demon, a spirit, or something else entirely, something without a name. I don't know if it had been waiting in Harold Moss all along, dormant, or if it had simply taken advantage of the moment his soul departed. I don't know if it's still wearing his face, or if it's moved on to someone else. All I know is that Christmas night, 2019, I drove something back from that cabin in the woods, something that shouldn't exist, something that crawled into a dead man's body and spoke to me in a voice that still echoes in my nightmares. Sometimes I wonder if there are others like it. Other things waiting in other bodies, waiting for someone like me to come and collect them, to drive them away from wherever they died, to give them the freedom to walk among the living again. I wonder how many times I'd transported something and never known it. How many times I'd driven through the night with something sitting up in the back, watching me through the darkness, deciding whether to reveal itself or stay hidden. The thought keeps me awake at night. I still live in Port Angeles. I still see the county van sometimes, driving through town with a new driver behind the wheel. I always look away. I don't want to know who's in the back. I don't want to know if they're really dead. And every Christmas, when the snow starts falling and the roads get dark and empty, I stay inside. I lock the doors, close the curtains, and wait for morning. Because somewhere out there, on a lonely forest road in the San Juan Mountains, something is still walking. Something that sounds like Harold Moss and looks like Harold Moss, but isn't Harold Moss at all. And it's still looking for a ride,